Next speaker, Lord Moylan.
My Lords, the intention behind this bill is wholly welcome. As my noble friend the Minister said in her opening remarks, domestic abuse is the most awful of crimes, and it's right that the government should bring forward measures that would not only curb it, one would hope, in the course of time or as rapidly as possible eliminate it. In the mid-1990s, I had in my local authority area some responsibility for a small government-funded programme for addressing domestic violence locally. And despite the early efforts of my noble friend Lord Young of Cookham that he referred to earlier, those were in fact still pioneering days. And indeed, there were large parts of the country where there was wholly inadequate, still are in some cases, provision of refuges for women fleeing domestic violence. Happily, one thing had developed quite well by then, and that was that the police were already taking a much fresher approach to domestic violence, willing to look at it as the serious crime it genuinely was, rather than earlier attitudes which had regarded it, perhaps, regarded it to some extent as almost an internal family matter, unless it was pushed too far. So we did make progress, and that was good, and it's very encouraging that attitudes have developed and changed so much over that period that it's accepted now that this is and should be wholly unacceptable behaviour. But that's why this bill is deserving of considerable scrutiny, and proper scrutiny, in your Lordship's House as it comes here, because it is a bill of very considerable importance. And there are three areas I'd just like to mention briefly that have been touched on partly, but only by one or two noble lords. First is the question of definition. The definition of domestic abuse, so much wider than the domestic violence that was the focus 25 years ago, which was a physical and physically identifiable activity. The definition of domestic abuse in this bill does need, as the noble Lord Farmer said, some exploration, some teasing out, some clarification that it is going to be wholly robust in its application. The second is that the bill contemplates the further extension of the imposition of criminal sanctions for breach of an administrative order. And I was delighted to hear my noble friend the Minister say in her opening remarks that the domestic abuse protection orders to be introduced under this bill are to be trialled locally before being rolled out nationally, because it is terribly important that we are sure that they are both workable and just. And the third thing I want to mention is we have, of course, in all of this, to maintain our high standards of justice in both the criminal and the civil justice system. So we have to ensure that even alleged perpetrators are given the proper rights that they are due when charges are brought against them. And we should never allow the very important, the very proper focus on the victim that has dominated this debate, rightly dominated this debate so far, to be interpreted as a failure to give the full rights to the alleged offender, the alleged perpetrator, that they are entitled to. As I say, that is all irrespective of sex. So these, my lords, in addition to the points raised by many other noble lords, are issues that I would hope could be explored to some extent when the bill proceeds to committee stage.